She introduced him as a friend, and I logged the word the way you log a false alibi, useful later, meaningless now. I shook his hand and measured the lie in his grip. Dry, practiced, proprietary. He stood too close. He smiled like the room owed him rent. On the counter were 3 glasses, spaced evenly, waiting for a future that didn't include honesty. That wasn't a mistake. That was planning. I asked one question, clean and harmless, the kind liars expect because they've rehearsed the answer. How long have you known each other? He paused. A pause is an invoice. You always pay later. His eyes flicked to her, not to check facts, but to check permission. That told me who the client was. A couple of years, he said, patting the answer with fog. She stayed quiet. Silence can be loyalty. This one was complicity. He kept talking. Titles without substance, projects without edges. Noise meant to bury the pause. I nodded and watched his feet. He knew where the mugs were. He didn't ask. He moved like a tenant who'd already signed a lease. I smiled once, not warmth, calibration. Smiles make people generous with errors. When he left, she held the door a second too long, like pressure could keep truth from swelling. She waited for a reaction. I gave her none. Reaction is currency. I don't spend it early. I spent the night building a ledger. Times, glances, permissions, the extra glass. No feelings, no accusations, architecture only. This wasn't about catching her. It was about inventorying what she thought she could steal without consequence. I didn't confront. I indexed. And the moment I closed the notes, the outcome stopped being a discussion. It became a schedule. Silence after the door shut wasn't tension. It was clearance. I let it breathe. She busied herself with pointless tasks, rinsing a clean glass, aligning coasters, rituals people perform when they need to feel useful while being watched. I stayed still. Stillness forces movement elsewhere. She spoke first, lightly, testing whether the ground would give. I answered with less than required. Short replies starve narratives. That night, I expanded the ledger. Dates, durations, overlaps. Not what happened, how often, and who benefited. The pause before answers, the permission glance, the third glass. Patterns don't care about excuses. Patterns convict quietly. I pulled older moments from memory and placed them where they belonged. The late nights that arrived without stories, the sudden privacy upgrades, the way affection became transactional. Each entry reduced the story's degrees of freedom. Normal returned the next day because I allowed it. Normal is camouflage. People hide better when they think they're unseen. I made coffee, asked nothing, confirmed nothing. Absence of friction reads as approval to opportunists. By evening, she was faster with her phone and careful with her words. Care is a cost. Costs signal debt. I moved one object, just one, to a different place and watched her notice too quickly. Control hates change. She asked why. I shrugged. Shrugs invite mistakes. She made one, then covered it, then covered the cover. Triple handling always leaves prints. By midnight, the ledger wasn't a record anymore. It was a map of leverage. I closed it and set a reminder. The goal wasn't truth. Truth negotiates. The goal was consequence, and consequences require timing, not speeches. I slept well. Schedules do that. Normal became my weapon. I kept routines intact so she'd mistake restraint for ignorance. People like her relax when they think you're slow. They add details they don't need. They reuse lies until the seams show. I listened, nodded, and stored everything without comment. Comment creates resistance. I wanted acceleration. She adjusted her behavior in small, expensive ways. Phone face down, notifications muted, stories shortened. Efficiency isn't honesty, it's optimization. She was optimizing risk. I let her. Space does more damage than pressure. Pressure sharpens liars. Space dulls them. I watched cadence instead of content. Answers arrived too fast or too polished. Jokes landed late. Affection showed up after absences, like a receipt stapled to a purchase. Compensation is a confession with better lighting. I logged it all. Times, triggers, returns. The ledger thickened into certainty. I mentioned his name once, casually, as if it meant nothing. Her blink betrayed the cost. She recovered quickly, which told me she'd practiced. Practice means repetition. Repetition means exposure. I thanked her for the clarification she didn't give and changed the subject. Gratitude misapplied rattles people who rely on moral framing. By midweek, she over-explained plans I hadn't questioned. Over-explanation is panic-wearing professionalism. I kept my calendar full and my tone light. Lightness makes people reckless. Reckless people create witnesses. At night, I slept early and well. Preparation looks like calm, because calm is expensive to fake. I wasn't waiting to catch her. I was waiting for the structure to lean far enough that a single removal would collapse it cleanly. By Friday, it leaned. Hard. I removed the smallest support and watched the load redistribute. No announcements, no drama. I stopped confirming plans and stopped absorbing inconvenience. When she said she'd be late, I said, okay, and meant it. Permission is gasoline. She burned it fast. The first night she arrived late and eager to normalize it. The second night she skipped the preface entirely. By the third, she preempted questions I hadn't asked, stacking explanations like sandbags against a flood that wasn't coming yet. Over-engineering is fear with a spreadsheet. I logged the times and the revisions. Revisions are admissions in installments. I rearranged my presents, not my things. Shorter replies, fewer check-ins. No bids for attention. Attention is a drug. Withdrawal exposes dependence. She compensated with brightness and plans. Future talk meant to anchor me while she drifted. I agreed without detail. Details bind. Agreement releases leverage. I shifted one object, again minimal, and watched her ask why too quickly. Control hates drift. Drift reveals who's steering. She smiled while asking a tell that the question carried risk. I shrugged. Shrugs invite miscalculations. She made one and tried to repair it mid-sentence. Mid-sentence repairs leave seams. I placed a bag by the door, not packed, visible. Symbols do work when words would invite negotiation. She noticed and cataloged it silently, then tried kindness as a solvent. Solvents don't dissolve steel. By the end of the week, the beam creaked, not collapse, signal. The structure was ready for a test that couldn't be rehearsed. I set it up without telling her. Consequences don't ask for consent. They arrive on time, whether anyone's ready or not. Reassurance came right on schedule, dressed as concern. A last-minute lunch suggestion, a soft hand on my arm, a sentence that started with, "I just want you to know," and ended without information. Reassurance isn't care. It's damage control. It's what people deploy when they feel the ground shifting but don't know where the fault line runs. I accepted and watched her manage optics. Safe food, neutral topics. Future plans floated like balloons, meant to test which ones I'd still hold. She apologized for checking her phone. Too fast, too practiced. Unnecessary apologies always cost something. I noted the time, the angle, the lock. Performance is tiring. Fatigue produces errors. She reached for my hand on the walkback. The gesture retrieved from storage, dusted off and reused. I didn't resist. Resistance would have told her where the edges were. I let her believe the move still worked and logged it as compensation. Compensation follows withdrawal every time. That evening, I asked for a small, practical favor tied to a date. Nothing emotional, nothing accusatory. The answer came instantly, already packaged. Prepared answers belong to prepared exits. I thanked her and moved on. Gratitude in the wrong place makes people uneasy. Uneasy people rush. Later, alone, I updated the ledger and closed it for the last time. It was complete. Not proof for a conversation, ammo for an outcome. The structure wasn't leaning anymore. It was balanced on one remaining support, and she was standing on it without knowing. I set the alarm and turned off the light. Tomorrow wasn't about understanding, it was about execution. I asked the question when defenses were busy elsewhere. No preface, no softness. Ordinary tone, ordinary timing. We were moving, keys in hand, weather irrelevant. I asked about a date, just a date. Not a name, not a place. A Tuesday from weeks ago that should have been forgettable if it belonged to the truth. The pause came back, loyal as a habit. Longer this time. Long enough to bill interest. She answered with a version that covered daylight and abandoned night. She filled the gap with confidence, like speed could outrun accuracy. I nodded. Silence does the rest. Silence makes people hear the fractures in their own voices. She corrected herself, then corrected the correction. Each fix solved one problem and created two more. Her words stayed calm. Her rhythm didn't. Rhythm doesn't lie. I didn't interrupt. Interruptions offer exits. I wanted her to keep walking the hallway she'd chosen. At the corner, she stopped, not me. She searched my face for judgment. I gave her logistics instead. I thanked her for reminding me and unlocked the car. Gratitude after inconsistency lands wrong. It tells people you're done negotiating. During the drive, she talked about traffic. I counted the turn signal clicks and logged them against the revisions. Patterns close themselves when given time. By the time we parked, the question had done its work. It hadn't exposed her. It had exposed the load-bearing lie holding everything up. That night, she stayed up late, rearranging objects that didn't need rearranging. Busy hands, empty control. I slept early. Tomorrow would bring the reveal, not because I demanded it, but because structures fail on schedules they write themselves. The reveal didn't come as a confession. It came as logistics, which is how cowards announce decisions they hope won't be questioned. She mentioned seeing him again the way people mention picking up dry cleaning, necessary, routine, already approved in her head. I didn't flinch. Flinching turns choices into debates. I asked for a practical detail, time, duration, something measurable. She answered, then revised, then smiled to soften the revision. The smile failed. Her eyes were already elsewhere. I watched how she prepared to leave. Shoes chosen for distance, not comfort. Bag checked twice. Phone at full charge. This wasn't a meeting. It was a consolidation. People don't prepare like that unless they're protecting an investment. When the door closed, I didn't follow. I opened the ledger and drew a line under the date. Completion. Every entry converged here. Not romance, not confusion, allocation. She had reassigned assets, time, access, credibility, without closing the old account. That's theft by definition. She came back later than planned, later than amended. I stayed seated. She hovered, waiting for permission to rewrite the evening. I thanked her for the update and returned to my screen. Gratitude, again, placed where leverage used to be. It landed heavy. She tried to normalize with tone. Tone doesn't work without trust. That was the reveal. Not words. Alignment. The story no longer required me to participate. Once participation ends, enforcement begins. By morning, I had the list ready. Names, dates, attachments, consequences queued. This wasn't about ending anything. It was about making sure what she built couldn't stand anywhere else. Detonation doesn't mean noise. It means sequencing. I didn't confront. I executed. By noon, the pieces were in motion. Quiet emails, scheduled posts, documents shared with people who mattered to her more than I ever did. Screenshots don't argue. Timelines don't apologize. I let them speak in rooms where reputations are priced. I started with proximity. The mutuals who assumed loyalty was mutual. A concise note, neutral tone, attachments labeled by date, no commentary. Commentary invites debate. Files end it. By mid-afternoon, messages stopped landing on my phone and started landing on hers. Panic spreads faster than truth, but truth finishes the job. Next came leverage she'd forgotten existed, joint obligations reclassified, access revoked, a routine audit request triggered clauses she never read because comfort breeds illiteracy, accounts froze, then rerouted. Not theft, compliance, the kind that arrives with a signature and leaves with your balance. I timed it to coincide with her meeting him. Let the notification interrupt the fantasy. Public came last, not scandal, confirmation, a clean thread, verifiable facts, no adjectives. I didn't accuse, I aligned records. The word friend resurfaced, quoted, time-stamped, cross-referenced. Consistency is lethal when lies rely on ambiguity. By evening, comments weren't asking what happened, they were asking how long. She came home to a dead phone and a living silence. I didn't look up. Power shifts when explanations lose buyers. She tried urgency, then softness, then outrage. None of it moved anything. The blast radius was set. Aftershocks don't negotiate. I packed the bag I'd placed days earlier and left it where she could see it. Symbols close loops. Outside, my phone buzzed once. Confirmation, not concern. The system had accepted the input. Consequences were processing. Tomorrow would be irreversible. Collapse is messy for the person inside it and clean for the one who planned it. By morning, the narrative around her had inverted. Questions turned into distance. Distance turned into silence. The rooms that used to reward her charm stopped returning calls. That's how reputations actually die. Not with accusations, but with access quietly denied. Her finances followed. Not overnight drama, just a steady constriction. Cards declined in ordinary places. Subscriptions failed. Temporary holds that never lift because they were never temporary. She tried to borrow credibility the way she'd borrowed truth, assuming someone would spot her out of habit. Habit evaporates when liability appears. She called, then texted, then escalated to messages that mixed outrage with bargaining. I didn't respond. Responses imply reversibility. I let her watch the consequences stack without commentary. People understand gravity faster when no one explains it to them. By afternoon, the public layer had settled into consensus, not outrage, recognition. The same sentence repeated in different mouths. That tracks. That's the sound of a reputation snapping. Once it snaps, you don't get it back. You replace cities. She showed up at the door, prepared for a scene I refused to provide. I didn't open it. Cameras exist for a reason. She stood there long enough to be seen and short enough to pretend she hadn't begged. When she left, the hallway felt cleaner. I checked the queue. Everything that needed to happen had happened. Everything that needed to continue was continuing without me. That's the mark of a successful detonation. The architect becomes unnecessary. There was nothing left to say, only one thing left to finalize. Aftermath isn't quiet, it's permanent. By the end of the week, she had no story left that didn't contradict itself. Employers don't fire for rumors, they remove risk. Friends don't exile you for one mistake. They disappear when patterns align. The word friend became a liability she couldn't explain without admitting everything it replaced. Financially, the floor never returned. Credit tightened, then vanished. Leases require confidence. Confidence requires references. References don't answer when the subject is radioactive. She learned the difference between money and access the hard way. Money spends, access invites. She lost both. Publicly, nothing dramatic happened because drama would have helped her. What happened instead was worse. Search results calcified, screenshots archived, a clean timeline circulated without commentary, the kind that survives deletion because it doesn't need amplification. People didn't argue it. They filed it. I didn't forgive. Forgiveness implies a debt I'm interested in settling. I wasn't. I enforced alignment. Everyone ended up exactly where their choices placed them, and no one had to pretend otherwise. I didn't look back because there was nothing to verify. The system was closed, inputs processed, outputs delivered. Nuclear revenge isn't loud, it's administrative. It doesn't rage, it removes. That was the point.